Rhythm, or movement, refers to the suggestion of movement through the use of various elements. So we might use words like flow, beat, cadence, or tempo when we think of the word rhythm, or use it when we're thinking of music, for example. What rhythm really is the opportunity to do within a design is to move our eye. And it typically is used to move from some sort of centralized focal point and then throughout the rest of the design. So the type of movements that we might be able to then control is actually how it's done in many different ways. So one, it is that varying type of movements, the length of the movements, or even the pace of the movement. So we're going to look at line, space, texture, light, color, and pattern, other elements that you've heard of before, now that we're going to combine in order to create this sense of rhythm. So an undulating line, for example, will create a wave-like type of movement, which will rise and fall in pitch. It might have jagged lines or simulate some sort of jerky type of vibration. Staccato lines, for example, might, however, create a broken or more detached or abrupt type of movement. And you can start to see where some of these visual examples give you a little bit of a different energy, sort of vibe, as far as, what this line is really trying to express. So again, you have lots of power as a designer. Another way we can create rhythm within a design to move and lead our eye is just through the use of space. So we may decide to use a lot of maybe positive or negative space, and that choice right off the bat really makes an informed decision about how, again, the viewer will really engage with all of your design elements. So, for example, too much space can really result in maybe boredom or can stop the movement of your eye altogether. But if you do it well, maybe you find this really nice balance where the eye just rises and falls throughout the entire design to create almost like a sense of balance by use of rhythm. So we can create really a fast-paced or a slow-paced view depending on how closely packed together we put our motifs within our space, within our design, or how far apart. We can also use texture and light. So here, the structure of fabric or the construction of a design can really be conveyed through that use of texture and light. So shade, shadow, form, and contrast. So you can see here the undulations in this shiny fabric create a really draped effect, and they move your eye throughout the entire garment and throughout the entire body. It definitely creates some visual interest. Color. Color is always one of my favorites. So I think I mentioned a long time ago in our color presentation that people really connect with color. Sometimes we buy things just because of their color. Up to 85% of people will just make a really quick snap judgment because they want the black iPhone instead of the white iPhone, for example. So that choice as a future merchant who really gets to choose what their customer wants and needs becomes really, really important. So with color comes this sense of movement. So if we place color within our design in a particular area, we can create a focal point we can create emphasis. If we play with different values, we can work on catching someone's eye just through that high contrast of dark versus light. And then we finally have pattern. So somewhat similar to the idea of, space as far as organization goes of a particular motif, pattern is really helpful because depending on the type of pattern and the type of line used within the pattern really allows us to move our eye throughout the design, whether it be very organically or in maybe a very stiff and rigid manner, in some sort of gridded like pattern. So the way we offset our motif also makes a difference. So with all those elements sort of in review, we're going to now take a look at multiple methods we can use to create rhythm. The first being repetition. So that's really this idea. You've heard repetition before, that something is super important. And as a designer, we say, okay, guys, this is important, and I'm going to show you by repeating it over and over again. It's this idea of reinforcement. And that repetition can happen all over a garment or within a concentrated area. So here are a couple really nice examples. In this very sweet little girl's garment, you can see that white color in the headband and the dress become a way of connecting and almost unifying the garment. We also are repeating that organic line in the headdress and in that ruffle on the Peter Pan collar, which is very sweet. So it's that flowered texture and repetition of color that really kind of hammer home this concept of repetition being very important. It leads our eye throughout the entire look of the garment. On the right, we have another example. It's really the gold trim here that's being repeated throughout the look. It has the same color, it has the same texture, and the same reflection of light. So this is how we know, again, to this designer, this idea of, rich wealth, high shine, elegance. We're trying to exude richness within the garment becomes really important. And even the placement of this nice gold texture really helps lead our eye. So from kind of the hair, which even matches that goldish color, then through the neckline, straight down, and that vertical line at the center that elongates the body, then to that nice trim at the hemline. The gold cuffs on the sleeves, again, repeat that kind of tubed sort of seaming work that's done on the collar as well. I like this example, this Isaac Mizrahi advertisement as well, because there's a lot happening within this design. And we can see in a less obvious way than I'd say the last couple examples, this use of repetition. So what's being repeated here? We are repeating that pink color. So from the model's pink dress to the actual product that we're trying to pitch and sell, pay close attention here, because eventually you will actually make a perfume advertisement. That's your last Photoshop tutorial in this class. So this is a really good example for you to take a closer look at. So what are we doing? Again, to tie in the product that we're trying to sell with this very whimsical visual. So use of color, matching the garment, Isaac Mizrahi's name in that pink text, the text of fabulous, the product's name, and we even repeat the use of the perfume bottle. So the model, spraying it onto her pup, which is a little silly, which is part of that shock and awe, how we're capturing someone's attention, huh? Kind of funny as well, humorous. So that alone, again, lots of repetition happening here. The concept of a circle, that polka dot, is being used a lot as well. So within the garment, it repeats the circular perfume bottle. The puppy's fluffy hair is also circular at his paws and on his head. And even a very small thing, but even in the background, the Guggenheim Museum, you can see the architecture has this curvilinear, bumped out, circular sort of expression to it. Even the lines in the concrete have this sort of organic line that's being used as well. So you can see lots happening to sort of create this sense of repetition and unity that actively moves our eye all around the design. The next method of rhythm is progression. So what this is a gradation. So you could sort of think of the ombre effect. My sister just did that to her hair. She has a pink ombre look, sort of like this lovely pink dress. So again, what that is a very sort of subtle sequence of units or adjacencies that then change step by step and lead your eye from one to the other. So we can do that in a couple different ways. So one might be in a more structured way, like the garment on the left. So this structure here, this underlying cage, really uses this concept of progression as the cage sort of nips in very small at the waist to emphasize that tiny form, and then really progresses and gets larger and larger, and you can see those lines sort of creating this idea of movement into the fullness of the bottom of the garment. And on the right hand side, you can see that the color is what slowly changes from this light color to this darker color at the bottom. So again, that's what we might call an ombre effect nowadays, but we can think of it as progression as well. So it's gradual change in difference in color. So the increased width of space between lines really helps create a progressive rhythm. Here's another example. So we can see this makeup sort of moving into the background, sort of being forced into a perspective. But it's again that gradation of color and that slow change that can be seen in the repetition of the bottles that leads our eye back to sort of explore each and every option that we have with this product. Next we have sequencing. So I would really encourage you guys to not only make use of this PowerPoint and the examples, but this is a good opportunity to remind you to take a look and be sure to do the readings in your book for rhythm. So it does a really nice job breaking down each of these methods for you and giving you more examples and more clarity around the distinction between each one. Because I will say that I feel that there are a couple, like progression, sequencing, and there's one other, transition, methods of rhythm that I feel are similar but different. So again, getting some extra practice in with your readings and going through some examples will be very helpful to you. So just to jump back in here, to take a look now at this concept of sequencing, the small shift from progression would be that now, when we're thinking about these units, they follow each other in a particular order now. So they come in a regular succession. So a simple pattern, for example, would create a sequence. So like in this example, the jumpsuit's geometric pattern sort of, if you look closely, moves our eye from one unit to another, and it repeats itself in a very sequential type of order. So this example of this rainbow type of skirt, again, you can see we know the colors of a rainbow. We know that purple, blue, green, yellow, red, orange, and red, these are the orders of a rainbow that follow each other in a specific order. On the previous slide, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, again, this is a sequence, this is a pattern that is created, that is known in music, for example. So in our brains, we are sort of hardwired to know, once again, that these items follow each other, and it's what we would expect. So with sequencing, instead of a very gradual sort of transition, it can be a lot more stark, like again in this skirt with these multiple colors. Next we have parallelism. So parallelism is when we will take the same unit and we will place it equidistant from each other within the same plane. So this can be done through line, shape, it could be done with color, for example, but here there's lots happening. So think of parallel lines like we might have learned in mathematics class at one point in our lives. And again, think in the same plane. Maybe it's a vertical plane or a horizontal plane, but we have this really nice kind of rigid, again, equally spaced element of design that is repeated to create this sense of rhythm and movement. So here on the left, the joists really in this outdoor architectural piece are one way of creating this, equalized movement. What else we can see, very simple things, the slats on the table run equally from each other within the same plane. The chairs are even aligned with the table runners, as a couple examples. On the far right, we can see the columns are really the focus here. So our eye kind of goes right down the center of this outdoor architectural piece, and again, where we're really led through it and into this perspective are these equally spaced columns that sort of create almost mini snapshots or picture frames that lead our eye to the back of the image. So here in an advertisement, we can see a couple fun things happening with this close-up detail of a perfume bottle. So with parallelism, if the lines are extended, they never will intersect. That's what, something being parallel to each other really means. So we always are sort of giving the object or the line its own breathing space for till the end of time, essentially, until we stop that visual. So here, although they're all different elements, they're exhibiting parallelism, running in their own planes. So we have the cap, the bow, the top of the bottle, and then the ribbed glass running equally distributed along the surface of that, again, that glassed over perfume bottle. So we just sort of move from horizontal planes to vertical planes, which again I think creates some nice visual interest. All right, we're about halfway through. The next method of rhythm is alternation. So this one's, I think, a bit easier to sort of grasp. So in this case, what we're going to do in a design is really play with this idea of a back and forth, back and forth. That's how we're creating rhythm. So we're taking two units that again move almost visually and rhythmically through the use of color, shape, pattern, texture, and so on. So in the garment, you can see, what are we playing with? A couple things. Positive and negative space. We can see skin, we can't see skin. We can see skin, we can't see skin. So we're alternating back and forth with that play, creating that more kind of risque, mysterious sort of vibe to this garment. It's certainly interesting. The other thing we're playing with is color as well. So again, that striped black line versus our blue sort of looks like it's been tie-dyed effect. So between the two, seeing skin and not seeing skin, that play of color also moves our eye. Then in this old piece of architecture, where we're playing with alternation is again with positive and negative space, the movement through that archway and then hitting the columns. So it's open, it's solid, it's open, it's solid. Playing with that archway and really interesting organic shape, and then that more sterile vertical line is kind of an interesting play as well. So to me, I feel this very opened and closed feeling that moves my eye throughout the entire interior of that architecture. Again, very playful advertisement here. So we're playing with this really nice use of color and kind of interesting shapes. So back and forth, my eye moves from white to a black shape, a white line or stripe to a black sort of line or shape. So very visually interesting and engaging here. And again, I back and forth look throughout the entire garment with that use of color. Grid, another one that I think will come very naturally to you with this idea of rhythm. So with a grid, just as you can imagine sort of right off the bat, you can think of a vertical and horizontal line that is sort of locked. So you can also think of the term gridlock in this case. So the arrangement of vertical and horizontal lines that are going to create some tension, and it's going to suggest this idea of stillness. We're gridlocked, our effect can't really shift or move. So on the left, we have these planters that are very, very organized in a, equally spaced environment in this almost cage-like construction. We don't get a crazy sense of movement, but again, we have this nice sense of security that those plants aren't going anywhere. I'm like, they're in prison. It's sort of how they look, truthfully. And then you have the plaid garment on the right. So once again, that idea of plaid kind of creates this locked sense. So we don't get a whole lot of playfulness or use of organic line or lots of movement, but again, feels a little bit more frozen and still. In this advertisement, which I've been really interested in the ads in this PowerPoint. I think that they're pretty nice examples. This ad with the images of the details within the squares really creates that concept of interest because they're each, different details. So we might stop and focus on one square. My eye naturally goes to that top right corner that has the Levi's logo and that model. And as we've learned, we're really attracted to people typically So she captures my attention and my interest looking straight at me. And then my eye really moves from her down, like almost in a clockwise direction, to the pant detail with the shoe, onto sort of the denim, waistband and jacket, and then kind of back up again to sort of that fit in the leg. So overall, they've really laid out that 4-square grid in a very balanced way, I would say, which encourages this idea of rhythm and movement. Broken rhythm. So this one's kind of fun. Just think about all right, where's my clap, right? So I'm clapping, and then it stops. So really think about maybe the clapping when you are considering broken rhythm. So I know that's a more auditory or sensory connection, but now how can you translate that into a visual? So what happens with broken rhythm is that we have a pattern and all of a sudden it's interrupted. And that interruption is really what draws our attention to the design. So in the left, the top of the garment has these, really nice solid sort of look to it, and this really interesting, again, very simple sort of look. But if we look at the bottom of the pant, we have lines, stop. Okay, so our eye sort of moves almost more naturally from the bottom of that flowy pant with this progression of line that moves up finally to hit that very solid, simplistic top of the garment. So what draws our attention up is that rhythm and use of line, and then boom, we get that simplistic, solid top of the garment. And on the right-hand side, this is more of a real-life example of a structure. It's definitely more accidental, but you can see the broken rhythm within this pattern. Next, we have transition. So I know earlier in the presentation I mentioned that transition is, in my mind, somewhat similar to progression and sequencing. So it's those little details that will really help you get some more extra practice in with each of those different types of rhythm. So with transition, what I want you to really focus on is that it is incredibly subtle. Sequencing, remember, is a very more straightforward pattern, like a rainbow. We know what's going to happen next, or a pattern. We know what will happen next. It's expected. With progression, it was more of this kind of ombre effect, or this change from something maybe small to something large, or again, a color change from something white to something dark. But with transition now, again, our eye keeps moving through the design, but it's really almost very difficult to notice. So on the left here, it's really the stance. The pose of the model is what we're focusing on here, that moves and transitions our eye from the skirt, that A-line skirt, from her little narrower waist, and moves our eye with that, again, subtle A-line, and we see her leg kind of propped out slightly, that then our transition goes from skirt to knee. So the shape of her legs is almost trying to mimic, with her stance, that bottom shape of the A-line in the skirt. So we're trying to sort of emphasize the look of the garment, that it doesn't just have this straight and narrow cut, but it does have this like somewhat slight flare. So that's very subtle transition that we're talking about. And then on the right, I almost think of a PowerPoint presentation, or the lights, when you turn the lights on and off and they, again, sort of slowly fade in and out if you have it on one of the special lighting timers. So again, from here, it's, think of that PowerPoint fade almost, and we're playing in the Mosoni ad with color and with light to sort of show this very dusky transition from garment almost fading into nature. So what they're trying to do here is really connect you with the environment and connect the product with, again, its background, with the land, with this natural composition, with this very subtle design. Pattern. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. We don't even have to go on and on about it. It is what it is. We can use patterns to create rhythm. We can see them continuously repeated through an extended space, whether that's in a garment, within a building, within a piece of furniture. So here again, I think a couple things are happening by use of rhythm. I think we play with color, with alternation, this fun like white, blue, back and forth somewhat. I think there's an argument for the use of that type of repetition, but also again, this kind of all over pattern, it extends over the entire space of this garment, and so it creates again this nice rhythm from the background that's blue, using these blues and marbles, and then into the chair that uses the blues, and into the garment, and then really the focus is the overall pattern within the garment itself. And finally, radiation, always the one I like to hammer things home with. So remember, radiation, we create a central focal point, then our eye moves along those radials outward to create interest and movement of the eye. So on the left, our eye really goes to the neckline, which makes her face sort of more of a prominent look, like feature, that red, bold lip. I go there, and then my eye again just slowly moves around with that nice sort of circular motion through her windswept hair, through that curved neckline that almost looks like radials coming from the sun. The mirror, again, a very sunshine type of expression, moving to the center, and then having our eye move all around with those radials. And finally, the garment. While I'm not sure how I feel about my focal point within this garment, is very clearly pointing us in the direction of a certain part of the body to emphasize, but it does create, I'd say, a pretty unique design at the bottom half of the garment. Really nice texture, and I definitely would think on the body this would create a very nice curvilinear look and shapely line to the hip. And then here we have radiation at the center of the woman, and at the peacock feathers, move our eye around with the radials. So again, we like people. My eye kind of goes to her face. The peacock feathers sort of move me then to the rest of the design. While I think the focal point here is likely that handbag, they're doing a really nice thing to create unity. We've used color to repeat her lip and her fingernails. The color of the bag actually mimics the color of the eye within the feather, and also has this really like animalistic sort of vibe. So we use animal feathers, we have a cheetah print, we use that alligator or croc kind of skin within the handbag too. So this example I think is nice with radiation, but again, also this idea of unification, which you will learn all about in our next lecture. So I want to put it all together and just hit a couple slides where I can tell you a few different methods of rhythm that are being used. So if we take a look at this advertisement, here are a few things that are happening. So one, both women are wearing blue, so that's something that's being repeated. So we're repeating the use of color, even within the building compared to the sidewalk as well, not only in the garments. We also are playing with this idea of parallelism. So that's happening in the bars on the windows, the actual windows on the facades, and the lines of the dress as well. We are playing with grid. So really, the beginnings of this we can see in the form of the facade and in the mortar of the lines on that facade. So those large, very blocked, I guess they'd be called, and they're not panels because it's concrete, but the almost oversized brick look is creating, again, that idea of stillness within that gridlock. And then finally, alternation. So where we play with alternation is that solid wall to open windows, solid wall to open window, back and forth and back and forth. And I think you can also make an argument for alternation from that concrete hard building to the soft green texture, tactile texture of the bushes along the bottom of the design, and then finally the concrete once again on that hard element. So it's hard to kind of tactile soft, back to hard again. So again, really nice, if you really analyze, we could really analyze these images to death. I'm sure you might start to feel that way. But it's pretty fun. It's like playing I Spy. And again, soon you guys will be masters of all these different elements and principles of design. Another example would be this Ralph Lauren advertisement. What we're doing here is playing with repetition of colors. We have neutral textures, furs, animal prints. The lines in the jacket are very similar. The lapels are as well. We also can see some broken rhythm. I've got a person, a person, a person, a person, a dog, a person. So that dog kind of, again, breaks up this sort of movement of our eye, all of a sudden creates something interesting and different and playful. I think we could go on about this advertisement for lots of different reasons, but we'll save that for another day. And then let's just look at this example as sort of a final example. I think I've posted a couple more images for you in the PDF PowerPoint. If you want to keep practicing, I highly encourage it. But here I'll give you a couple more thoughts that I've had of methods of rhythm that are being used. So one, repetition. Once again, you've probably noticed each of these different advertisements have had repetition. So good marketing strategy. When something's important, throw it in there a bunch of times. So here, color, shape, line. We have the blue color, the black and white vibe is really the main color palette of this advertisement. Everybody's taking the same step at the same time. That's another sense of repetition. And then we see that Target logo being used multiple times as well on those T's. Parallelism, we have the train tracks, right, that move our eye back into the distance. Our legs are even, the attempt is to have them equally spaced, each of those models. Radiation is being used. So if we look at that bullseye at the center, wow, our eye goes right there. that was smart. And then our eye moves and radiates outward from that central point. And then finally, I really see some alternation. So that play of blue, white within the bullseye. And then even if you look closely at the models, they were fairly strategic even with their legs, like who's wearing shorts, who's wearing denim. So we kind of play back and forth with a little bit of interest there, I would say as well. So lots to look at, lots to learn, lots of information in this PowerPoint. Get to practicing, read your textbook, and try to implement some of these concepts in your next Photoshop assignment. All right, best of luck, guys, and looking forward to seeing what you come up with next.